In this lesson, we are going to be looking at when we factor out the GCF, what are we left with? Okay, so we are going to look at this expression. Notice there's addition signs in here, in this piece of it, not like our previous lesson. So what I want to do is I want to look at these two terms and I want to figure out the GCF. So I'm first of all looking for the biggest number that goes into both 5 and 30. The biggest number that goes into both 5 and 30 we know is 5. Okay? Then I will look at my variables, my x and my y, and I want to see, is there a variable that goes into both x and y? Do both of those have at least one thing that they have in common? And they don't. So the only thing I can pull out of here is a 5. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go in parentheses like this, and you're going to see what you're left with. Because what you're going to do is what goes inside that parentheses is when you distribute the 5 through that parentheses and multiply it out, you should get back with what you started. Okay, so here's what I mean by that. When I take 5 times whatever's right here in this spot, I should get my first term, which in this case is 5x. So I need to figure out 5 times what am I going to put right here to get 5x, and that would be x. Okay, then I need to figure out 5 times what am I going to put right here to get positive 30 back again. Okay, so 5 times positive 6, I need that there first. So 5 times 6 gives me the 30 back, but I also need the y right here. So 5 times 6y will give me 30y. And if you distribute that back out, you should get back to where you started. So 5 times x is 5x, 5 times 6y is 30y, and we are good. Okay, so this is what you've got right there. All right, in this particular one, I'm going to start first of all with the numbers, and I'm going to look at the number, the biggest number that goes into both -9 and -15. We don't like this first term to be negative right here, so when we factor it out, if it's negative, we're actually going to factor a negative out. Okay, so first of all, 9 and 15. The biggest number that goes into both 9 and 15 is 3. 3 goes into 9 and 3 goes into 15. Okay, since this first term is negative right here, I'm actually going to pull out a -3. Okay, then of course I have my x here and my y here, and x and y don't have anything in common, so I can't pull anything out of an x and a y. Okay, so here we go. Again, I've factored out a -3, and now I'm going to put my parentheses. And what goes inside the parentheses is whatever it takes, so that when you distribute this -3 through, you get back what you started with. So I need to figure out -3 times what is going to give me 9x. Well, -3 times +3 gives me the -9, and then 9x means I need the x with it. Okay, now I need to figure out -3 times what quantity gives me positive 15y. Okay, well, -3 times -5 gives me the positive 15, and then of course you need the y with it. Okay, so -3 times -5y gives me positive 15y. And you'll just keep moving through that if you have more terms. Here's one with 3 terms. Okay, so I'm first of all going to look at what's the biggest number that goes into 6, 12, and 2. The biggest number that goes into all of those is 2. Okay, so I can factor a 2 out of there. Then I'm going to look at my variables. So this one has an x to the 6th, so that's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 x's. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4 x's. This one has 2 x's. So do you see how they all have at least 2 x's? They all have at least 2. So I can pull out an x squared. So basically what that means is if you've used 2 of those x's from each term. So I used 2, I used 2, and I used 2 when I factor them out. Okay, that'll help us here in a minute. So I've pulled out what I can, and now I'm going to put a parentheses here, and I'm going to figure out 2x squared times what is going to give me 6x to the 6th. Okay, so first of all, if you look at the numbers, 2 times 3 gives me the 6 part. And then, remember I had 6 x's to start with, and I pulled 2 out right here. These are the 2 that I pulled out, so I crossed them off this list, and now I have 4 x's left. So I have x to the 4th right there. Also, when you think about this, when you add exponents, x squared times x to the 4th, when you multiply those, you add their exponents. So 2 plus 4 makes x to the 6th. Okay, so that's that. Now I'm going to go to the next term, and I have to figure out 2x squared times what quantity is going to give me negative 12x to the 4th. Okay, well, 2 times negative 6 gives me the negative 12. I had 4 x's. I used 2 of them, so I have 2 of those x's left. Okay, and now I need to figure out 2x squared times what am I going to put right here to give me positive 2x squared. 2x squared times what gives me positive 2x squared, and that would be a positive 1. Okay, and that's how I will get that. Don't forget to put the 1 there. Lots of people, really common math mistake will be for them to leave everything in green out. But you need to have whatever you need to have in parentheses whatever it takes for you to be able to distribute that what's out in front through it and get your original back again. And if you don't have that 1 added onto the end that's in green, you aren't going to get that last term, and you won't get back to where you started. All right, and one more here. I am looking for the biggest number that goes into 18, 30, and 5. Basically, I'm sort of forgetting about positive and negatives right now. So the biggest number that goes into 18, 30, and 5 is 1, actually. The only thing that goes into 5 is 1 and 5 goes into 30, but 5 does not go into 18. So the biggest thing I can pull out of there is a 1. Okay. However, what I want you to think about is this. I don't like this first term to be negative here. It's sort of mathematically impolite for it to be negative. So when it is negative, you want to factor out that negative. So all I can pull out is a 1, but I'm also going to factor a negative out because I don't like this first term to be negative. So I'm actually going to pull out a negative 1. Now, we know in the math world that a lot of people actually don't write this 1 right here. It's considered to be there, but they often don't write it. Okay, I will write it so that you kind of know where it's coming from, but you might not see it written. You probably won't see it written if you're doing your homework or dealing with accelerated math, okay? Then I'm going to look at my variables. This term right here has x squareds in it, so it has 2 x's. This one has 1x. This one doesn't have any x's. So there's no x's that all 3 terms have in common. They don't all have at least so many x's. This last term doesn't have an x. So there's no x's that you can pull out, okay? That's why I put my parentheses there. And so now I need to figure out this. Negative 1 times what gives me negative 18 squared? And that would be positive 18x squared. Okay? And then I'm going to go on. Negative 1 times what gives me positive 30x? And that would be negative 30x. And then I need to figure out negative 1 times what gives me negative 5, and that would be positive 5. And that's where that ends, okay? So notice all that happened when I factored the negative out was that all my signs switched. This one went from negative to positive. All of the signs switched all the way across when you factored that negative 1 out. Okay, and another one here. I'm looking for the biggest number that goes into 12, 20, and 32. And I know that what goes into 12 is 1 and 6, 3 and 4, 1 and 12, 3 and 4, 2 and 6, okay? So I know that 6 does not go into 32 or 20. I know that 4 goes into 12, 20, and 32. And that is going to be the biggest number that goes into all 3 of those. So the biggest number that goes into 12, 20, and 32 is 4. And then this one has 1, 2, 3, 4 x's. This one has 1, 2, 3 x's. This one has 2 x's. Okay. So when I look at that, every term has at least 2 x's. So I am going to take 2 x's and use them. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to erase this so that this doesn't get confusing to you. So now I've pulled out what I can pull out, and now I want to go back, and I want to figure out what I have to do here. So I need to figure out this. 4x squared times what gives me positive 12x to the fourth. So 4 times 3 gives me 12. I had 4 x's right here, and I pulled 2 of them out. I used 2 of them. That means I have 2 left, so x squared. Okay? Then 4x squared times what gives me positive 20x to the third. Well, 4 times positive 5 gives me positive 20. And right here I had x cubed, but I used 2 of those x's out in front here. So since I pulled 2 of them out, I only have 1 left. Okay? And then I need to figure out 4x squared times what gives me positive 32x squared. And 4 times positive 8 gives me positive 32. And then I had 2 x's right here, but I pulled both of them out front already. I've already used both of those x's, so I actually don't have any x's left. And this actually is my answer. All right, this one we've got 2 different variables in here. So we're first of all going to look at our numbers. I'm looking at -2. There's this imaginary 1 right here that's not written. And then, of course, you have a 5 in the third term. There is no number other than 1 that can be pulled out of there, except for I do want you to recognize that this first term is negative, so you're going to pull out a negative, and in this case, a 1. Sometimes you'll be able to pull out a negative and then a 3 or a 5 or a whatever, but in this case, just a 1. Now I'm going to look at the a's. So this one has 1a, this has 2 a's, this has 3 a's. So they all have at least 1a, so I'm going to pull that a out. Okay? Then I'll go to the b's. This term back here has 3 b's, this has 2 b's, but this term doesn't have any b's. So there are no, all 3 of these terms do not have at least 1 b that I can share and pull out of there. Okay? So that is all I can pull out, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to figure out what I'm left with. Okay, so here we go. -1a times what gives me -2a? Well, -1 times +2 gives me the -2. And then I had an a up here, but I pulled it out in front. I used it. I used 1a out of there. And so when I pulled it out in front, and so I don't have any a's left. Okay, then -1 times what gives me positive a squared b squared. Well, -1 times -1 gives me that. Okay. Then I had 2 a's right here, but remember you used 1 of them when you pulled it out in front. So I only have 1 a left, and then I haven't touched these b squareds. I didn't pull any out in front, so I would just have b squared. Now, you probably, when you're doing your homework, won't see that 1 right there, so I'm just going to erase it. Okay. And you actually won't see it out front either, but I'm going to leave it so that you know where it came from. All right, then -1a times what gives me this quantity back here. -1 times -5 gives me the +5 part of it. I had 3 a's up here, but I pulled 1 out in front. I used 1, so now I only have 2 a's left. And I had 3 b's right here, and I haven't used any. I didn't pull any out in front, so that would just be b to the third. Okay, so this would be your answer right here, except for you probably would not see this 1 written. It would probably just look like this, just so you know. Okay? And one last one. I'm looking for the biggest number that goes into -15, +25, and -30. So the biggest number that goes into 15, 25, and 30 is 5. I want you to notice that this is a negative out in here, so you're going to pull out a -5. Okay, so that's the biggest number. Then if I look at my x's, I have x to the third, x squared, and 1x. So they all have at least 1x. Okay, so I'm going to use 1x from each one of those terms. Then if I look at my y's, I have y squared, and y. So they all have at least 1 y. They all share that, so I can pull that out of there. Okay, and then that's all I can do. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to see what I need to do to figure this out. Okay, so here we go. -5xy times what gives me negative 15 x cubed y squared. Negative 5 times positive 3 gives me negative 15. If I have x cubed right here, but I used 1 when I pulled that x out in front, now I only have 2 x's left. I had y squared right there, but I used one of those y's when I pulled one y out in front, so now I only have a y left. Okay? So now negative 5xy times what? Gives me positive 25x squared y squared, and that would be negative 5. Okay? I had 2 x's here, but I pulled one of those out front, so I used one and I only have one left. I have 2 y's right here, but I used one and I only have one left. Okay? And then lastly, negative 5xy times what has to give me negative 30xy. So negative y times positive 6 gives me the negative 30. Negative 5 times positive 6 gives me negative 30. I had 1x right here, but I used it when I pulled that one out in front. And I had 1y right here, but I used it when I pulled that out in front. So I don't have any x's or y's left, and this should be your answer.